All right, everyone, thank you so much for joining us today for another series webinar from our master series. We've got a topic today: learn the proven 5-step formula for doubling your profits. That sounds great to me. I'm sure it sounds great to all of you. We've got Matthew Murillo here from Aftokrat Academy, and I'm Maddy Martin with Smith.ai. If you are not yet a client of Smith.ai, we are a 24/7 virtual receptionist service for live calls and website chats, texts, and Facebook messages. We host this master series so that we can do a little bit of wraparound education for our clients and for our greater community. There are so many topics that touch small business owners, and this is really here to be a free resource to you with experts like Matt, who are coming in, giving an hour deep dive session on a topic we have heard is important to you. So today we're talking about really small incremental changes that can yield major changes to your revenue, to your profits. How do you increase your prices without losing clients? How do you increase the average cart size or value or transactions per client? And then how do you generate more leads that actually convert? So this is a huge range of opportunities that we're going to cover. I'm sure Matt will guide us through these topics, but there is that 5-step formula that he's going to discuss. The secret to increasing your conversion rate by 10%, which you know is a big deal actually. Increasing your prices without losing your ideal clients, and then how to get to that point where you're actually doubling your profits. So Matt, can you just introduce yourself first off and tell us a little bit about you, your career history to this point, and then Aftokrat Academy.
Sure. So like you said, Matt Murillo with Aftokrat Academy, and my career actually started in legal. I think a lot of your clients are lawyers, and I've been practicing law for 11 years now. And shortly after getting into it, I was typical, like a lot of startup attorneys. They're doing everything on a shoestring budget and just trying to piece together different information from different sources. And as I got into it, I quickly realized that I love the business of law more, right? Figuring out the strategy, figuring out those puzzle pieces. And as I got further into that also then made me realize I love the business of business. So I started getting into, attending all the marketing seminars that I could, attending every conference that I could, just to learn kind of the tips, the strategies, different ways to get certain things done, and how to get those little micro commitments that a lot of times consumers need in order to give that final yes, especially when you have such a big purchase like typically comes with hiring a lawyer. So that brought me to where I am today. And given the experience of working with different businesses, we've kind of pieced together some information that a lot of business owners now can take and incorporate into their business, and hopefully get to the point where they're now increasing their revenue and really getting to enjoy the business that they want to create for themselves.
Awesome. I mean, one of the things that you're talking about here, making sure you understand the spend and also the sort of emotional and behavioral response behind the consumer, that potential client, that's absolutely critical here in understanding their decision-making process to influence your conversion rate. So I understand that you have a PowerPoint, so feel free to go ahead and share and get started with your presentation.
Awesome. Well, let's go ahead and get that up. Excuse me if I look away a little bit. I've got multiple screens.
Oh, no worries.
So you've got this screen, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Well, welcome everyone. Today we're going to talk about the 5-step formula for doubling your profits. Now, one of the reasons why we need to consider this is really, the crux of what it means to be a small business owner. The goal, I always tell people, the goal of business is to make as much money as possible while doing the least amount of work as possible. And I don't mean, you're trying to overcharge or do nothing for your clients. You want to give them a benefit, but you want to provide some automation, provide some strategies, provide some workflows where you can, so that the whole client generation, the client onboarding system works smoother, and you're taking less time doing that. And Maddy, please stop me and ask any questions along the way if you feel like anything needs to be clarified. So let's talk a little bit about what it takes to produce more clients, right? First, you need to generate more leads. Right? And then once you get those leads, you need to figure out how to convert them. And we'll talk about each of these things as we go. So right now, it's just a general overview. Now, the way you convert them is by breaking down that end result that you want that customer to take, that prospective client to take. Break it down into the core components. And that's what I talk about when I mention the micro commitments, the micro yeses. I actually knew an attorney who every new appointment, he would start the conversation off, Mr. and Mrs. Client, do you mind if I take a quick second to go use the restroom before we start our conversation? The answer is always going to be yes, but there's your first yes. And if you get several of these along the way, that ultimate yes for are you ready to retain is a lot easier for the client, right? So what does it take to produce more revenue? Now you've generated leads, you're converting the clients. How do you get more revenue? Well, part of that goes into what you're pricing. I notice a lot of times, especially with service professionals, those in the fee for knowledge industries, they generally undervalue what their services are. And so you want to make sure that you're thinking about what value it is that you're bringing to the client, but you also want to consider what your, sorry, I lost a little bit. You also want to consider what expenses you have, because you want to make sure that your net profit, which is what we're talking about today, is something that is sustainable for the business. Everybody wants to make money, but you want to make money so that you're putting a little bit away and you have enough to carry you down the road. One of the key differences that I often talk to with business owners about is the difference between making money, making revenue, and actually being profitable. Right? You can make money, you can be getting revenue in, but that may not necessarily translate to being profitable. So the 5-step formula. I know a lot of times, if anybody on the webinar is like me, I don't like the fluff. So I wish that they would always just get to the point and give me what the crux is, right? So the 5-step formula. Now, the 5-step formula is going to be used to compel your clients to increase, right, your leads, increase your conversions, and increase how many times they buy from you. Right? So these are the 5 critical components that you do need to address. And in their simplest form, it's step 1 is leads, right? You need to get more leads because your business you can't do business without leads. You need to increase your conversion rate for those leads. You need to increase your average sale value, increase the number of transactions, and increase your profit margins. Now, each of these can be taken different order depending on the life cycle of the business, where the business are, if it's a startup, if it's been in business for a few years, and where some of those things may really need a little bit more help. But those are the 5 components that we're going to be looking at today. So before we can even start discussing how to double our profits, we need to know where our baselines are, right? You don't know where you're going unless you know where you've been. So for the purpose of the presentation, we're going to go ahead and create just a make-believe business. We're going to assume that this business has 1,000 leads during the course of the year, and our conversion rate is at about 25%. That's going to give us an overall customer acquisition of about 250 clients for the year. Now, let's say we're a retail business, so it's a little more back and forth. There's more repeat business, and they do 10 transactions in a year. Now, let's say it's a low value item, so $100 per transaction. Now, you can work with these numbers differently, especially in the legal industry. These numbers are going to be a little bit different, but the result will still be the same. Now, those numbers will give us a total revenue of $250,000 a year. Now, let's assume that our profit margin based on cost of goods, all the other expenses, the overhead that we have is about 25%. So that gives us a profit of about 62,500, right? So you're working a lot to make some money, but that may not be profitable once you're paying yourself.
So Matt, can I interrupt you just for 1 second? Because I think there's some confusion sometimes when we talk about leads, actually defining what or who a lead is. Is a lead someone who visits your website? I'm guessing a 25% conversion rate? No. So a lead is someone who is, are we talking about qualified leads? Are you talking about expressed buyer intent? What are some of the ways that you would define that?
The way I define a lead, and that's a great question. The way I define a lead is somebody who's raised their hand and said, yes, I'm interested in speaking with you and getting more information. Any type of communication that they are now saying, I'm open to having a conversation.
Okay, completed a form, booked an appointment, inbound call, inbound email, like expressed intent, basically.
Right, some way that allows you, right, with all the different laws that we have surrounding the spam calls and everything, some way that allows you to then further engage with that individual.
Right, they have to, in order to be a lead, they have to be willing to give you their contact information. They cannot be an anonymous lead. That's actually a funny but very valid point. You take that for granted. Yes, definitely.
Okay. Awesome. So speaking of leads, let's talk about lead generation. All right, so this is step number 1, right? We have to generate more leads. So how can we generate more leads above and beyond that 1,000 that we initially talked about for our make-believe business? So generally, I know of about 19 to 20 different strategies that can be used, field tested, proven to work. But let's go ahead and focus on one for the time being, and let's talk about a targeted direct mail campaign. This is one of the most cost-effective ways to do it if it's done correctly, but it can also be one of the most expensive ways to do it. And that's things like the Val Pack. I'm not sure if you get those things. It's, you know, the huge package mailer with 200, 100 different businesses all giving you some sort of coupon, right? Things like that. So a campaign in this scenario can be multiple mailings. It can be a single mailing. It just depends on what kind of result you're looking for. The problem that we have with this kind of tactic is typically most business owners don't necessarily use it correctly, and they don't attempt it because of that potential high value, that high cost of entry. So one of the things that we do is we suggest that when you're talking about lead generation and you're talking about doing a campaign like this, is to make sure that you are targeting the right people. You're targeting the right people with the right message. Now, one of the things that you can do in order to use this lead generation is figure out who your target market is, who you actually want to serve, not just who you can serve, but who you want to serve, and create a list of those individuals. If you're trying to target individuals, certain homes with a household income of, say, 100,000 and over, there are programs out there, there are services that will allow you to target just those homes in a specific geographic area, right? And one of the ways that you can do, that you can reach 50,000 new households is by doing all of the legwork yourself. And especially if you're a marketing agency, you can do the legwork yourself and then reach out to other industries that want to reach the same target, reach out to other professionals that want to reach the same target and offer them a package deal, right? And the way you price that is they're essentially paying for you. So if I'm a lawyer and I'm practicing family law and I want to do something like this, I'm going to reach out to other professionals in different industries, maybe real estate, maybe mortgage, finance, right? There's a number of ways to go about it, but I'm going to do all the legwork. I'm going to grab, even if it's 1,000 households, I'm going to grab that list. I'm going to dictate the terms, and I'm going to start reaching out to people and say, hey, I'm putting together this mailer. You don't have to worry about printing. You don't have to worry about sending the mailers out, mailing anything, doing your ads, anything like that. I've got it all taken care of. I've got a team here. This is what your fee is going to be. Build it all in, right? So by the time it's all said and done, you're walking away getting the same kind of message, getting the same kind of broadcasting capability, but you're getting it for free.
So you're saying that you're covering your costs by sharing that list and the postage costs, basically.
Right. So if I reached out to you, I said, hey, Maddy, I'm targeting these people. I've got a design team ready to go. They're going to create your ad. We've already got the parameters lined up for who we're going to target. All you have to do is you just have a one-time fee of $500. And that's it. You just tell me, you just send me the media that you want to use, photos, if there's any specific message, but we'll take care of everything else from there.
Okay, and are you sharing sort of real estate, so to speak, on that postcard? Is it a multi-page? Is it an envelope with multiple offers in it? How are you executing on
and that would come back to and that would come back to what I end up wanting to do most of the time. The way that I suggest doing it is having a separate postcard or a separate almost like a sheet of paper for each business, right? A small little, maybe quarter
flyer,
sheet.
basically.
Yeah, for each business, just something so that you can fit several businesses in there. And that can lead back to a landing page. It can be a call now prompt, something to, and like we talked about earlier, to invite.
So you're making your own value pack, basically. You're saying,
right.
USPS, when you move, you don't have the monopoly on this. It's available to all of us. I mean, I've never heard of anyone doing this, and it's actually very interesting. And you're saying that you're covering your design and mailing costs with partners involved. And, I would encourage anyone who's listening to this to think very carefully about who you want to align your brand to, because there is sort of an implied support for these companies that are going to be in the same mailing with you, even if that's not the case with the USPS. You recently moved to your new home. I don't think Best Buy and Home Depot have anything to do with each other, but there is sort of, when it's a small business, an implied alliance. So referral partners, if you're looking to improve that relationship or cement it further, this could be a great campaign for you to kill two birds with one stone, which is attract new clients and then also sort of reestablish and cement those relationships.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that's a great point with being careful with who you align yourself with. Mm-hmm. That's absolutely something to consider if you do something like this. So typically with something like this, depending on the industry, response rates can be very low or a little bit higher. I've seen anywhere from 2% up to the 15, 18%. So it is something that you'll have to consider carefully, because like I said, it can cost a lot of money if you're not doing it properly.
And how do you assemble the list? Let's say that, I don't know, there's plenty of like list buying solutions out there, and some of them are old and stale and, not very good, and others are very good quality. Like, is that something that you're saying you have access to at Aftokrat, or is that something that you could provide recommendations for those, list sort of generation solutions?
Honestly, I've looked at some of those list generation services, and I've even used them myself a few years ago, and they're just not that great.
Great.
For the cost and how many bounce backs you end up getting, my recommendation would probably be just to hire a virtual assistant and tell them these are the people that I want to look for. Have them do some of the vetting for you. It can be a very cost-effective way to put together a list just using Google and a virtual assistant.
And how are they going to put together, let's say that for businesses, that's one thing. There's Sales Navigator, there's plenty of research, or there's at least like editing down like larger lists that you might buy. But what are you suggesting for individuals? There's tools like Phantom Builder where you can literally look through the yellow pages, but how would a virtual assistant use Google to find individuals and their home
So
address?
if we're talking about individuals,
okay, so just B2B, I understand that.
Right. If we're talking about individuals, the easiest is probably going to be the Postal Service. They have a ADDM service, and it's been a little bit since I looked at it, but I believe they still allow you to narrow down based on zip code or specific areas and target households with certain income, target households with certain age ranges in there, right? So depending on the industry, you may or may not be able to allow for those demographics. But if not, then you could also do something like Info USA. I've used them in the past and they've been the best of what I've used. Okay. But again, there's a lot of bounce back with a lot of those lists because the information just isn't kept extremely current.
Right. And when you're talking 18% conversion, you're talking about actually valid sends that land, right, at someone's doorstep, so to speak. So, and how many sort of touches do you need to get over maybe 5-7% conversion rate? Are you sending multiple mailers? Is it the same businesses every time, or are you the only consistency?
So as we're going through this, we're going to be talking about conversion rate, and there's going to be a difference, right? There's one conversion that happens when the prospect receives your initial message, right? If they go to your website. And then there's another one that happens if they go to the website and then they fill out a form, right? So in that scenario where we're just, that's the conversion rate that I'm talking about now, just taking that next step from receiving, say, the mailer to now going to the website and getting more information. But sorry, I lost my train of thought.
No, it's okay. Just wondering how many touches it takes to sort of get to that reasonably optimized conversion rate until you're spending too much money and you're not going to get any more milk from that cow, Yeah.
So generally, in my opinion, it's going to be anywhere from 5 to 12 touches to get anything. And that doesn't necessarily mean there has to be a lot of communication, but just to appear in front of the person. So if you're going to be doing something like this, it's generally a good idea to have the budget built out for multiple mailings.
Okay.
And get in front of the person, especially because, let's be realistic, it's going to be considered junk mail. So you want to have something that's going to be eye-catching to draw the attention and for the prospect to actually open up the package and look at it.
Right. What's the special offer? I mean, HelloFresh and my, Kitchen Island right now, I have something offering me, 2 weeks of free meals or something like that. Right. Yeah. So, all right, I'm not throwing that one out. Who throws away 2 weeks of free meals? Right. What do I have to commit? So, I mean, there is something there about there is your initial cost, and I've got experience with the long ago, like Groupon and the 50% revenue share. You always have to add into your cost, not just the upfront cost, but also the discount cost, right, where you're saying, look, I'm going to give you 50% off your first purchase or 10% off your first month if it's a subscription service or whatever, $100 flat rate off no matter what the price is. That's a cost because it's a loss of future profit if you bring that person in. Now it might not cost you $1 to actually deliver $100 of value, right? But that is a loss of revenue that you would have received that often we build into more sophisticated models of these campaigns and what they actually cost.
Yeah, totally. So if we take that example, say you do send out 1,000 and you get that 18% response rate, you're still getting 180 leads. If you're down in the 4%, or 2%, while it's not significant, 2% still gets us what, about 40?
And how much is your client worth? So if it's,
Right.
you know, if you get a response rate is 180 new leads and your messaging was on point, if your price is in the thousands, you may find, wow, if I can sign someone up for, a recurring subscription, financial advising services or something like that, it might be extremely valuable to you to get 5 new clients. Right. And your conversion rate, if you can just book a call with them, your Calendly link is on the postcard as a short URL or a QR code is perfect.
Right.
Scan the code, book the appointment, show up this afternoon for the call. That's a relatively lightweight but high conversion way to say, like, the time to entry is low, time to conversion is really short. Maybe you don't need that many new leads if you're able to really sell well. So you have to be able to close here too, right?
Right. You have to close, and like I said earlier, you have to know the numbers. You mentioned, how much does it cost to acquire the client? And that's going to be one of those factors that goes into what you're pricing at, because you might be pricing at a point where your cost of acquisition doesn't allow you to be profitable.
Mm-hmm. Here's another thing. So when we talk about a lot of these professional services, whether it's like a kitchen remodel or flooring or finance or legal, some of the, depending on if you're in a rural or urban or nationwide or location-based service delivery, if you do trademarks versus local personal injury law, you're going to have a very different target audience. So you might have an embarrassment of scale. If you do trademarks, you can do it federally. Where are you going to focus? That's a high class problem, but it's still a problem. Versus the local, let's say Buffalo is very litigious. I'm in Buffalo, New York. So everyone knows, Celino and Barnes, William Mattar, et cetera. If I'm here, the cost of a personal injury lead is wildly expensive. So it's not expensive unless it is expensive compared to the other channels that you would turn to generate leads, knowing that referrals are not going to pay all of your bills probably for a while until you're at a point of extreme business maturity, right? So, and even then, might not be the be all end all. If you are thinking, wow, this might be expensive, there's a lot of moving parts, I'm going to have to pay someone to design it. Well, a lot of these services that go with EDDM are going to include some design solutions maybe for you or templates that look good. But if it costs you $500 to get a PI lead or a lead through PPC, which is really expensive these days for a lot of verticals, what does that mean comparatively to the cost here? Starts to not look that expensive, right?
Right.
And it's something that's in their home or business that they might look at again. Whereas if you're in a Google search or on your Facebook feed, you can't go back to where that ad was on your Facebook feed. If you close out, you're going to see a whole new set of ads. And that's good for Facebook, not good for business.
Right. And I think that brings up another good point. This may not necessarily be the right strategy for someone, depending on who their target is. Like, and if you're targeting millennials, people that are very tech savvy, very tech driven, they're probably not going to care about opening up the mail. Unless they have to, they're not really going to look at the mail. If you're targeting those that have, that aren't tech savvy, you're not going to do a pay-per-click. You're not going to do the PPC. You're not going to do Facebook leads. This is going to be something that's more in line with that, right? So you have to think about who your target market is too when you're figuring out which tactics you're going to be using.
Yeah, I think it's really important to think, like, we had a question, does it work with all practice areas? Does it work with all business types? I think what's very clear here is it's less about two things. Well, probably many more than two things, but two we have time for because Matt's just going to wring my neck if I don't let him talk. So one is it's not really about the practice area. It might be about the practice area insofar as, can you target or do you not know who's going to have what need when, right? Is it a predictable or schedulable need? Is it a need that you can generate demand for or not? You cannot generate demand for personal injury. You cannot create, if you're ethical, a personal injury like demand, right? It's going to happen or it's not, and you want to be visible when someone searches or of someone's mind. That's why we have banners on the highways of a lot of PI firms. Now, when you have the ability to pay and you have a demand generated service such as estate planning or such as a home security that works maybe for renters or buyers, something that is a cleaning service that almost everybody would need. Is it a single family home? Maybe you're selling lawn or landscaping services. Very high probability that that person wants their lawn mowed or whatever, right? You can generate demand for those things. Can you generate demand for workers' comp? No, you can't, not really, right? So there is a general awareness campaign that is typically not a really good fit for postcard or mailer packets, because what Matt is saying is you want to build awareness, you have to be able to generate demand for it. An offer means that you can incentivize someone to take an action now rather than deferring or deflecting that decision or not making that decision at all, opting out of it completely. Maybe for financial planning in a wealthy neighborhood, it is something that you get them to switch, you get them to sign on for the very first time. For cleaning, same thing. For maybe pet or childcare. So that's something that you want to be mindful of. And for products, that's just, is it a match for that demographic in general? When I worked for your mechanic, and then Matt, I promise I'll give you the floor back. We did car repair and maintenance at your home or office, right? And this is really relevant because you cannot create demand for an oil change right now. An oil change happens, let's say 1 to 2 times a year, right? You can't create demand for brake replacement. You have no idea where that person is in their car maintenance history, how old their car is, et cetera, unless you're the dealer or you sold them the car. You don't want to guess at that. You have a high likelihood, majority likelihood that you're off and they're going to throw it out because it's inaccurate to what they need. Now, are you going to sell them car washes? You could. Are you going to sell them, maintenance and updates and cleaning and upkeep, polishing and things like that? Seasonal services. Do you need your car winterized? Things like that. Absolutely, you can generate demand for winterization. So think about that when you think about, is this the right fit for me? If you cannot generate demand, you really need to think about what is your conversion rate from cold, especially when you're not sure if that person is in a position where they're a good potential client for you right now.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point, especially if when you start to put that in the context of, I may not be able to generate demand for this service, but is there a complementary?
Can I create a service is a totally different opportunity.
Can generate demand for, right?
Yes.
And actually that brings us, just because of time, we'll keep moving, but that brings us to the next part, which talking about all the lead generation, all that stuff. I think if you're using the right message, targeting the right prospect, I think it's reasonable for us, for our make-believe business, to increase our conversion by 10%, right? That's 100, or not conversion, our leads. That's 100 leads over the course of a year. Not impossible. But let's move on, talk about conversion. So that's exactly what you're talking about, right? So when you talk about whether that's something that you can do to generate demand, in a way you can generate demand. If you're talking about conversion, now this is the point where, since we have different conversion aspects, the point where the prospect now becomes the client, right? So most professionals, from my understanding, are somewhere between 5 to 15%. I think the average is typically right around 7% from prospect to client. I could be off, but that's typically around where they're at. Most law firms I know are typically around that number.
And it's not from booked appointment to signature.
Right.
Because a lot of times we talk about our conversion rate is 80, 90%, but that's after you've wooed them. on
Right.
a call where you demonstrate your expertise. What
And
Matt's talking about is from start to finish.
in my law practice, I use Clio Grow,
Mhm.
right? So I have it set up in that I know how many calls are coming in just to make the initial call, that initial prospect, to how many set the appointment, to how many show up for the appointment, how many actually retain after that. And it's great because I can click on it in 2 minutes. I know what my conversion rate is at each stage, but also from the initial prospect to client. And so having those numbers are great because that's what you need. But a lot of times we don't lose the conversion because of price. And I think as service professionals, that's one of the things that we get into, that we feel like we're overcharging or somebody's not going to hire us because we're charging too much. But that's absolutely the furthest thing from the truth. I can't tell you how many times I've retained someone after giving them a higher price than a colleague of mine. If people purchased on price, we would have no price disparity. We would have no Apple. We would have no Versace, no Burberry, right? Everything would be similar, but it's the value that's associated with it, right?
We hear very often, I'm in a lot of groups of professionals, and it is a common thread where people will say, I was terrified to make the leap, but I increased my prices and my lead quality improved, my conversion rate improved, the noise went down, and we have a real way to test how sincere and serious the leads are. And people who have that conversation, who are well informed, sometimes on the phone, the Smith.ai receptionist will even say, like, just to let you know, the pricing starts at, is that, within your budget? If yes, move forward instead of charging for a consultation, right? You're at least giving them the information to make an informed decision.
Right. And that all comes back to the value. So, when you're talking about conversions, the way that you're going to eliminate your barriers, the way that you're going to create those irresistible offers, the way that you're going to get in front of these clients is by creating that drip campaign. You often hear, in order for someone to buy from you, they have to know you, like you, and trust you. And the way you do that is, if you have a drip campaign, which is our tactic for this conversion section, that's how they get to know you. That's how you develop those additional touches. The prospect gets to know you better, and they start to feel more comfortable with you, right? So you eliminate at least that objection. And by building up that relationship and building up the value, you're slowly tearing down those barriers that are keeping them from saying yes. And you're building up the value so that when decision time comes, price is not an issue, right? You've built up enough credibility, enough value in their mind to get past that. So what is a drip campaign? It can be, like I mentioned earlier, it's mail or email. Now, this is going to be different than the lead generation tactic that we had earlier. That's just mailing it out. The drip campaign is a follow-up series. It's once somebody has raised their hand and said, yes, I want to learn more about your service. I want to learn more about your business. And here, you need a minimum of 6 touches. But this is going to be, say, with somebody sets an appointment, but they don't retain, they don't show up, whatever the case might be. You build out a campaign series, right, based on that topic to stay in front of them. And that gets us back to the point you made earlier with the lead generation, right? Can you create the opportunity? You absolutely can with the drip campaign. You're staying in front of your prospect until the point when they are ready to buy. Very few people are ready to buy right now. Most will need to think it over. Most will need some time. And this is how you stay in front of them so that when they are ready, you're the one they contact.
Here's the thing, and this might really surprise a lot of people who are here. It takes way longer than you think to convert people if you're focused on demand generation. Let's say that I meet a fellow attorney, maybe let's say Matt. You meet me at a conference. You're like, wow, Smith.ai sounds really great. I want to move forward. Let's have an appointment, send me some information. I follow suit, and life gets in the way, business gets in the way. You've got 2 businesses, you're busy, right? You're You've got basketball as your passion. That's where all your free time goes. Whatever it is, no fault of your own. You've got things going on in fish that are frying. And then I keep following up with you and you're like, man, I'm so glad that she's still following up because that's something I really want to do, but I just haven't gotten time for it yet. And it goes in the Gmail snooze, or it goes in the to read or to do, or hey, assistant, could you remind me about this next quarter? And then all of a sudden 6 months go by and you come to a webinar and you think, you know what? I actually do need to do this right now. I'm going to just like not do anything right after this call. And in 10 minutes, like get myself set up or signed up or whatever. And I'm going to move forward no matter what. Great. It was 6 months later, right? And it's amazing how time flies. And what I highly recommend is not even to just do 6, because often when you say 6, Matt, you know, that's like, all right, I'll do 6. Great. Then I'm done. I want to emphasize what Matt's saying here, which is it is a bare minimum. I would say don't stop until they tell you to stop and you don't have any good reason to even reach out anymore. Either they're not a fit, or they have said stop, or they've changed businesses, or it's undeliverable. Why would you possibly stop if someone at one point said, I'm interested, and they haven't told you they're no longer interested? You're making a huge assumption there that all your competitors are also making, which is, why bother? Well, my question is, what is the cost to you of setting up an email that drips a little bit longer? It probably takes you 5 minutes to make another variation of that email and another 5 minutes stacked on. You've got an hour committed for an extra several months of outreach at whatever cadence makes sense. So if you're in PI, you're going to be doing a daily cadence if you're until they say yes or no. Or if you're in estate or financial planning or trust establishment, that might take, you know, weeks and months spread out from your campaign, because you don't want to bother on a sensitive subject like that, where people really do need to have multiple stakeholders or family members, et cetera, at the table.
Absolutely.
So think about the cadence here in addition to that.
I have different length drip campaigns. I have various set up, but I have some that are a few days, some that are a year and a half, depending on how they come in. Because some of those
year and a half, no one's thinking about that, right? That is where your mind should be.
And that actually brings me, it's perfect segue, because it brings me to the next topic on here, the next bullet point, right? The think BBG. Now, I didn't come up with it, but one of my mentors says it all the time when he's talking about follow-ups. You know, you follow up until they die, buy, or say goodbye. Right?
You put it better than I did.
I mean, that's ultimately what it is. You have to keep on it. If you're not doing it, like you mentioned earlier, your competitors aren't doing it either. So you're leaving a fortune on the table, right?
Yeah, so get the fortune they're leaving on the table.
Right?
Seriously.
If we go back to our make-believe business, you know, we're trying to increase our conversion rate. We're not going to increase it by 25%. That's a huge number, right? We're trying to get a 10% increase. But that doesn't mean we're going to increase it to 35%. That means we're just going to 25.5%, right? So that small number will give us 302 new clients, which means we've now just increased our client base by 20% with that small little change, right? It's a big difference. So the transactions, and this gets back a little bit, you know, how do you create that revenue? How do you create that need? So I'm going to fly through this because I want to be respectful of everybody's time. But, you know, how many times have you looked in the mirror and thought, it's been 3 weeks since my haircut, I need to schedule another one, you got to wait another 2 weeks, right? What if the hairstylist just set it up when you were there? Now, how much more business can they push forward rather than pushing it back, right? If you go in and you got your next cut already set up for when you're going to need it, rather than having to wait an additional 2 weeks, that hairstylist just cut their time by 2/3, right? You don't have to wait 3 weeks. If you can create something like this, and you know that situation is going to be a subscription model, even though it may not seem like it, and you're going back for a repetitive business on a consistent basis. You may not be set up on auto pay or anything like that, but it's there. The subscription is the easiest way to create additional transactions based on what your industry is, what your profession is. I'm not going to go through these. I'm just going to hit some other examples. This is one of my favorite examples, the flower shop, right? How many guys, I have been guilty of it, I'll be honest, have missed an anniversary, a birthday, a Valentine's Day, right? What if you could go to that prospect and say, hey, I've got this package for you. You come in for 30 minutes, one time, I'll take care of your birthday gift, I'll take care of your Valentine's Day gift, your Christmas gift, anniversary, and a special occasion just because, right? You come in for 30 minutes, you pick your bouquet, you pick a special gift, and you write out your cards. I will plan everything myself. I'll send you an email, I'll send you a text message to say, hey, just so you know, this is coming tomorrow, it's coming in 2 days, but it's all done. You don't have to worry about it, right? Not only does the customer love it because it's less time going back and forth. They don't have to worry about finding time last minute to get that Valentine's Day gift or the birthday gift. But the florist has now, they haven't made one sale. They've now made 5 additional sales, 4 additional sales, depending on what that package is. So the customer who might have only come in that one time, now all of a sudden has 5 other purchases that are pre-planned. And you can charge for it ahead of time. You can charge for it as they come. That's up to the business owner. But there's different ways that you can do things like that. You can generate more business if you are a criminal defense attorney. One of the things I'm kind of surprised at with criminal defense attorneys is there's nobody that has a drip campaign for those that have been convicted of something, right? What's the next step that they're going to need? They're going to need an expungement. So yes, it's years down the road, but that's where you're starting to get your foot in the door now so that when they're ready, you're in, right? Different avenues like that. Sorry, I went through some of these already, so I'm just gonna go through.
And if you want, Matt, if you share the deck, I can send it out to everyone too.
Okay, yeah, we'll go ahead and do that after so people can have that as a reference. Let's see. All right, so actually this second bullet point brings up a great point here. If I'm the florist, I've relieved a huge burden from that individual. So not only do I get increased revenue, but because of that relief, they're probably going to be really happy with me. So it's a great opportunity for me to say, hey, would you write a review? Would you send over some referrals? Right? And now you're incorporating other lead generation streams into what you're already doing. So now it's compounding. And I think that's the part that a lot of business owners miss. It's the compounding effect of a lot of these things. So say we do that and we increase by 1 more transaction, right? Each client does 1 extra transaction out of the 10. So let's talk about sales, how to increase your price. I'm going to fly through this one as well because this gets back to everything else that we've talked about. We talked about lead generation and doing it well, targeting your market, right? We talked about conversion, getting in front of people, making sure that they know you, like you, and trust you. That's how you're going to be able to instantly increase your price without really any effect on it. This is one of the most misunderstood components of small businesses. And the reason why is pretty simple. They don't understand a lot of times how the cost of business works into it. So let's say you have a product that you sell for $100 and your profit margin is 15%. Well, that's $15, right? But if you increase that by 5%, the price, now you've added $5 profit. So you've got a $20 profit. You've actually increased your profit by 1/3, right? Your cost of business doesn't increase because you increase the price. So all of that goes to profit. And I had an example of a health club on here, but it's essentially that idea. You're targeting a specific niche, you're giving them value. There's no issue with what that perceived value is because by the time they say yes, they know you enough to say yes, they like you enough to say yes, and they trust you. You've been giving them value this whole time. And so in this example, if you increase by $4, right, you're charging 60, you have 300 clients enrolled. That's a gross revenue of 18,000 if that's your monthly payment. right? If your profit margin is 25%, that's only $4,500 a month. But if you increase that $60 to $64, well, that gives you an extra $1,200. Right? That's a pretty good chunk of change for such a small little increase there. Now, in order to lose money, you'd have to have 19 clients lose you from that for that $4 increase. I don't know about you, but when I see an increase like that, it's usually too nominal for me to actually think about it, right? You're not really going to lose a significant amount of clients when you're at that scope. Now, as an example, I did have a client who, this was about a year ago, pre-pandemic. He was charging, I believe it was about $85 an hour as IT. And we had this conversation a few times, and he finally decided to increase his price. He just about doubled his rate. And he lost a few clients, but not nearly enough to justify going back. And the response he got, I shared this story because I thought the response that he got was really, really funny. He said a lot of his clients basically told him, it's about time. We were expecting that for a while now.
Totally.
You know, so a lot of times we're in our own head about what we're charging. So if we take a look at this and we increase our average sale value by $10, that's the 10%, right? That gives us a total revenue of $365,000. So if our margin is what's next, you know, at this point, it's all about looking at your P&L statements to see what costs you have, what expenses you have that you may not be getting the most benefit from. You might have huge marketing expenses that you can cut out because you're not doing a good enough job targeting your ideal client, right? This gets us back to the Pareto Principle. I'm sure a lot of people on here are familiar with it, but it's that 80-20. 20% of your clients are generating 80% of your income. So your goal is to reach into that bag of 20% and expand that out as much as possible to only work with those 20%. That's what ultimately all of this actually comes back to, is focusing and targeting the clients that you want to work with that are profitable for you, not those that generate revenue, but that are profitable. That's when you really start to feel the effects of the $1 million business that I'm sure everybody on here wants to create, right? So if you replace those 80% with the 20%, you can get that often to up to a 60% 16 multiple. Now, how you do this is like we've been talking about, right? Your message has to speak to a specific target. With your conversion, your drip campaigns, it's a specific target. You're not trying to be everything to everyone. You're targeting a specific subset of the population, whether that's consumers or business owners. You're targeting a specific issue, right? So the more you niche, the more your business will stand out, because especially in the legal field, people aren't looking for generalists. They're looking for the DUI attorney, the domestic violence attorney, the child custody attorney, right? They're looking for
specialization also goes with higher rates, right? We're used to the specialist being more expensive, and those two things really go hand in hand.
Right. And so if we take that and we take our profit margin, we take a look at the numbers, and we can increase that again just by 10%, that 2.5% total, that's going to give us almost an extra $40,000 in profit, right? So obviously the title of the webinar is how to double your profits. So what if you could increase these percentages, not just by 5% or 10%, but what if you took some time, develop your systems, increase them by 30%, 40%, even 50%. My conversion rate in my law practice right now is at 55% as of yesterday. And so there's other things that I can be working on. But what if you just increase these things by 1% a week, right? This is a long game. This is not going to be an overnight success. Nobody's going to give you anything that suddenly makes you profitable overnight or even within a couple of weeks, right? You can start to incorporate things to start to see results, but all of this is a long game. So what if you've made small changes that allowed you to benefit from that by a 1% change in these 5 different categories over the course of the next year, taking 2 weeks off for Christmas, vacation, so 50 weeks, right? That gets you to 50%. So if we have a 50% increase, and we take our make-believe business, we're looking at 1,500 in leads for the year. Our conversion rate goes to 37.5. Again, not a huge number, it's very doable. Our customers go to 562. That's more than double what we were already going to be seeing, right? Number of transactions, we go to 15 instead of 10. That's something that can be done in the example I mentioned with the florist. We increased that by 4 or 5 transactions, right, with one go. Our average sale value jumps to 150 instead of $100. That means our total revenue comes just under $1.3 million, right? And if we then take our profit margin and also can shave down, become more automated, more streamlined, and our margin can be increased to 37%, that puts our revenue at almost 500,000. Right. And these are small changes. I would absolutely suggest anybody on the call go through some of these numbers and see where you want to be. Right. Put down your baseline, create a table just like this, put down your baseline and see what kind of increases you can reasonably expect over the course of the next year to see what it is that you have to do from there, what it is that you have to do to get to that profit number that you want to get to.
Matt, thank you so much. So just because we only have a few minutes left, and I'm sure there are a lot of questions, particularly, how does this apply to my specific business? What should I focus on first? I see a bunch of different moving numbers here, like which one's most important to me, or the lowest hanging fruit, or the, biggest sort of driver of impact based on my business. Like, can folks call you or email you, set an appointment, or talk to you more about this, or how can they learn more about where to get started?
I'd be happy to give my email out and my cell phone number. My email is Matt.
Don't give your cell phone number, not in a Smith.ai webinar, Matt.
No. But my email I will. So that is matt@aftokrat.com. Nice and easy.
Great.
And so they can email, reach out, and the biggest suggestion for somebody starting out, they're just trying to figure out what to start with first, because it can be an elephant. Don't worry about leads, don't worry about transactions, or pick one of either sale value, so look at your price and see if you're charging appropriately, or your conversion rate. It's typically going to be a lot easier to get going and start generating more revenue by fixing what you're already bringing in.
Not missing the existing stuff, right?
Exactly.
I mean, your leads already, you're not going to add more water into the funnel, right, into the bucket until it's not a leaky bucket. That would be foolish. Right. We all know that, right? But we do that every day. So, if Smith.ai can help you with that, we would be happy to, but I encourage you to reach out to Matt. Any final words that you would like to share, Matt?
Absolutely I would. And it's about Smith.ai, because a lot of times, the professional services come into, I don't have time for this. I've got to be on the phone. I've got to do this. I've been using Smith for, I want to say 2.5, 3 years now. And wow. It's relieved so much time, right? I don't answer any of my calls. Everything goes directly to you guys. You schedule my calls, all my appointments, make the call outs when I ask for it, but I can't tell you how much time that has saved for me to be able to focus on creating those drip emails and building out these campaigns, right? And
21-hour webinars.
Exactly.
Right. Who's looking after your business while you're here, right?
It's been crazy, and I tell people sometimes what you might pay somebody an hour for, that might save you 2 or 3 hours, right? Because then you don't have the back and forth. So really make your time a priority. Make your time a priority, schedule time to work on the business, and really create some strategies to increase that conversion rate. But otherwise, I mean, I'm happy to speak further and give some ideas to individuals if they want to reach out and talk about their business specifically. Happy to do that.
Wonderful. Well, everyone, I hope you will reach out. Matt, send me your PowerPoint. I'd love to share it with everyone here. I think we would all like to pour over these numbers a little bit more and dig into the examples you provided. But I know we're at the top of the hour, so I'll let everyone get back to their day. Matt, thank you for joining us, for sharing your expertise. And I think I can speak for everyone. You know, this was a really fantastic session. So appreciate you a lot, and I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, Maddy. Thanks for having me.